Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Do let me know if you can hear. I'm very happy to have joined with me Zorisha Hackett. So, Zorisha, good evening. Hold on. Good evening, Zorisha.
Hi, we
Hi,
can.
we can.
Yes, so I'm going to begin. So, thank you, Secretary Hackett, for joining me this evening on the hot seat. We propose to talk for around half an hour. I will ask you direct questions and you can answer me honestly. Now, I have never had the opportunity to congratulate you personally for putting yourself forward and serving the people of Tobago in your capacity both as area representative for Bethesda, Coteaux, and as Secretary for Education, Research and Technology in the Tobago House of Assembly. Congratulations and well done, and thank you for your service, Secretary Hackett. Now, you are indeed a credit to young people in Trinidad and Tobago, and that we should stand up and be counted. And off the cuff, I would describe you as ambitious, dedicated, and a passionate individual. This much has been seen with some of the great work you've done so far in your division. But has there been a bump in the road? Have you taken a tumble? Is complacency taking root? Or are your opponents grasping at straws and seeking to latch you in a trap? Now, you've been accused of arrogance, narcissism, and plain old lies. Well, tonight in the hot seat, we deal with the substantive issues, no area untouched, and give you the chance to speak your truth. Thank you for your time. Now, the PDP launched the Tobago First strategy. Your division in particular had a criteria to favor Tobago contractors. And most recently, when Tobago journalist Elizabeth Williams asked you if any Trinidad contractors got contracts from your division, you said it was fake news and made it abundantly clear that no Trinidad contractor got a job. So I have a few questions out of this before I pass it to you. Do you think this Tobago First policy is discriminatory? Is it your division's policy or is it a policy of the PDP? Or is it that Tobagonians have misunderstood and it is Tobago First, but not exclusively? So if it cannot be found in Tobago, then it can be sourced elsewhere, for example, Trinidad and beyond. So in short, Secretary, did you mislead the people of Tobago when you said no contractors from Trinidad were given a contract by your division in the emergency repair program?
Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for the opportunity to be in the hot seat and, of course, to set the record straight. First of all, I just want to take us a bit back to the date of that interview. That interview was done on the 2nd of September. This is a Friday before school reopened. And my division, with me at the lead, decided to have this interview to bring some clarity and bring some ease in the space as it related to schools reopening on the 5th. On the 2nd of September, I sat in that press conference with a document in front of me. And that document was sourced from the PIU, that's the Project Implementation Unit, and also from the Procurement Unit on the contractors we actually had engaged in the space up to that date. Now, in the Division of Education, Research and Technology, previously the Division of Education, Innovation and Energy, I met a policy document that speaks to community engagement. And what that means is, and it just recently changed from 12 to 15 electoral districts. There are 15 files in the division with every electoral district's name on that file. And what it's meant to promote is every electoral district in terms of engagement as it relates to the tendering process. And even with emergency repair works, you look at persons in that electoral district first. So you give contractors the opportunity to tender and so on in that electoral district. If it's found wanting, then you look at the neighboring electoral districts. So for instance, if Bethesda Government Primary School, there was some roof works to be conducted there, they're going to look in the Bethesda-Coteaux electoral district first. And if they looked in that district and there was no contractor suited to get that job done, qualified to get the job done, the neighboring districts. And the neighboring districts for me are Mason Hall, Mariah to the east, and in the west, Plymouth, Blackrock. All right? And you can even probably pull Scarborough, Mount Grace on one end and then Darrell Spring Whip. So those are my neighboring districts. If you looked in those districts and still we were found wanting, then you looked on the entire island of Tobago. And then if you looked on the entire island of Tobago, and of course no one fit that criteria, then Trinidad and Tobago, Twin Island Republic, once you're registered as a contractor and you're pre-qualified on that PCO, which is the Procurement Control Office list, there is a list that the THA has housed there, then you can be qualified to work with the Tobago House of Assembly. On the 2nd of September, while sitting at that press conference, and the thing is that, PS, those accusations of Trinidad contractors and so on, they were in the space since about July. As a matter of fact, there was a doom and gloom notion out there that the reason why the school repair program was taking so long to be initiated, it was because of two reasons. One, that secretary was probably trying to get her supporters to register quickly, and so we were stalling the process. Or two, we were looking for Trinidad contractors. And you know that Trinidad contractor notion comes from the fact that my political organization has been always linked to the UNC. And that notion of Trinidad contractor, it just didn't mean any Trinidad contractor, but the notion was meant to go in the direction of you're trying to take care of your financiers. You're trying to ensure that by the next election, you're set. And so it wasn't just a Trinidad contractor thing. Whenever it's alluded to Trinidad contractor, it's in racial and ethnic undertones. All right? So I saw that circulating in the space, particular fake profiles, and being pushed even before we engaged in the school repair program. And when we started, I started seeing it more heavily. And I was like, wow, you're setting a narrative up that even if we really had to engage a Trinidad contractor without even understanding the justification for that, you have already created this atmosphere of segregation and discrimination and so on. All right, so I'm looking at the document in front of me. And if you look at that clip, you're going to see me looking down because I was just trying to double check that in front of me to that date, we didn't engage any. What I should have done is probably explain community engagement in that press conference. Because had I done so, then I would have set the record straight from then and there that yes, on the 2nd of September, while I'm seated there, I don't have any on the document. However, we were still engaging contractors to that point. And if at any point in time, I realized that the division was unable to locate any said contractor for any works that we needed to get done in that school repair program, then of course we're going to go across the waters. And that is exactly what happened. On the 2nd of September, while in that interview, based on what I had in front of me, information sourced from the procurement unit, and again, secretaries are not involved in procurement. That's a unit that has to operate in silos and without secretaries' intervention and engagement. The information in front of me, no, to that point, no. Subsequent to that interview, I was asked the question again in the House by the minority leader. At that point in time, you know, you ask a question once, you gave a response to the reporter, you asked the question again, I started to become a bit worried. Is there something I don't know? Now, before that interview, I would have expressed that we were engaged, we were actually experiencing some issues in my division. And when contracts go beyond a particular spend, the administrator in the division is no longer responsible. It becomes the responsibility of the chief administrator. And so throughout that school repair program, and when we moved from the tendering part of it into the emergency repair works, which again, we ran out of time, and I ventilated what happened there in the space before. But when I realized we were running out of time and I had to engage the executive council for us to take it there, we charged the chief administrator with the responsibility of doing the approvals, because a lot of these projects at that point in time would have been beyond the spend of the in-house administrator one. And because we were experiencing some delays, lots of delays, you're running out of time, you have 57 schools you're responsible for to get ready by the 5th of September, the chief administrator had to step in and assist. Again, when I realized the minority leader kept prodding at this particular question, again, as secretary, you're responsible for a division. It doesn't matter if you're not directly involved. You want to get the answer. So I went to the chief administrator and I asked, you know, let me see the approvals that came in after that time. The chief administrator said, you have a new administrator, and I sent back the files. This is nearing the end of September. I send back all the files I have in my possession, and you can speak to your PIU to see if, we engaged anyone else since that day. I went to PIU, and PIU gave me an updated file. That's the one I have in front of me right now. All right? And when I looked at it, I realized that we did indeed have a contractor there. So me, of course, I'm asking, this contractor, I'm seeing this one contractor, and I'm seeing the one contractor attached to 7 projects, 3 in a particular school and 3 in 3 other schools. So 7 contracts, 3 in one and 3 in 3 others. And I'm asking, who is this contractor? And based on our policy, the policy I met in the division, it has to be that this contractor is definitely able to do something else no one else can do. Is that and then yes, this contractor, Avicon Services Limited, they are responsible for providing a service called Thermotech 99. And I had to ask, what's Thermotech 99? And because I saw the schools that were attached, I knew it had something to do with the roof, right? Roofing works. I visited Mason Hall Secondary with staff here at the division right at the onset of the school repair program. And Mason Hall Secondary had challenges from the get-go with their roof. And most of these schools that have the concrete roofing, they have that challenge where, of course, wear and tear, and with weathering, contracting, and expanding of the concrete, you have serious leaking issues. And so when I asked, what's Thermotech, who is Avicon, then I realized that Avicon was engaged by the Tobago House of Assembly predating me. So even before I came, for the same issue. We had some issues with Goodwood Secondary School. We had some issues with Bishop's High School. And we had some issues with tiling works at the brand new Scarborough RC in 2018. And so I realized former Chief Secretary and Secretary of then Education, Innovation, and Energy would have engaged this contractor in spite of the policy being in place for the community engagement. And again, it's because of your options you gave. Is it that it's Tobago first? And if the capacity is not to be had, then you engage wherever you're going.
Just for clarity purposes, because I know in the assembly you would have mentioned Kelvin Charles in 2016. I think Tobagonians might need some clarity
on my part. When I reviewed the sitting, I realized I said 2016. So I want to cross that from the record. Probably I'll have to find out how to get that corrected on Hansard as well. But it's 2018. So in 2018, he was Chief Secretary and Secretary of Education, Innovation, and Energy, and they engaged Avicon Services. And again, as I said, I'm going with the timelines here. So when I realized that that was the case, in the October sitting, I put together a package for the minority leader, a package with updated information. Because if he had asked me for information in September, then that information would have changed by October. And one of the reasons for that is by that time, we had approved and done final contracts for most of the contractors in phase 2 and in the emergency repair works.
So just before, I think, because people might just have a little bit of confusion, perhaps what we could do is that we could explain the process, because usually the THA and different divisions would use a competitive tender process to be able to allow, because I see Tobago Love has asked here, why did the project meet the emergency stage when we knew the work needed to be done since April?
All right. So we did have the tendering. Are you hearing me? You hearing me? All right, great. So yes, we had a phase 1 and phase 2. And actually, Avicon appears on the phase 1 and the phase and 1 for emergency repair. So he didn't get the approvals until September though. But what happened is there was the competitive tendering process. That happened in June, and by July, the evaluation committee was not yet set up. So the evaluation committee, after you tender, you have this team that's supposed to be an independent team that sits together and they look at the bids that come in, and they look at it and they make determinations on who is going to win that bid, right? So that happened in June and the beginning of July. And by mid-July, I'm realizing that we have all these packages. We had 96 packages. And we're still in the 20s with the packages. Because the tendering process, you know how the tendering process goes. It's a lengthy process. You have to have the contractors go out and they do their scope and they come with the estimates. And then you have a QS that actually does that internal estimate, and you have to see who comes closest to it, and then the evaluation committee sits and then chooses that person. Then you have to have the contract done up, you have to have it approved by either administrator or chief administrator, and then you bring that contractor in, you do up the contract, and then they go out. So because we had so many packages, and because when the division went out to these schools pre-April, it was even before April, by the time we got to June, lots of the scopes had changed. And you don't want variation, because that's what happened when you go with a scope that's too early in the game. You literally may end up thinking you need to repair 2 galvanized, and then by the time you get to the actual project, the contractor realizes, listen, it's not 2, it's 4, or it's 8. And with variation, that's an additional cost on the division.
Now, can I just ask a question really quickly? Now, I know that the minority leader has put up a video recently. It's a clipping from the parliament of an exchange between you two, and he has made the point that there's not Tobago contractors haven't really been given a fair shot. I know that when we spoke off the record, you had mentioned that the full page was not shown, and also I think the minority leader also mentioned one of the criteria you mentioned in your thing is that it needs to have a Tobago address. He said there wasn't. Could you speak to that?
Right. So let me not break my chain of thought here. Listen, minority leader asked for contractors to emergency repair works, right? I put together all the information I had at that point. You're seeing all these documents, all of this, and gave it to the minority leader as a package. There was no aha moment or I caught you moment. Things changed from the time I did that interview to the time I was questioned by the minority leader. Things are changing even now. As a matter of fact, the same Avicon services, they have not even started works on these schools, because the product needed, the Thermotech 99, it's not sold in Trinidad and Tobago. It's something they actually had to order and have shipped in. It's not even here yet. So the point I'm making is the thing is changing, it's moving. But when I gave this information to minority leader, and that's the thing, politics is such a crazy game. You're giving information, give the information. You understand what I'm saying? You're sharing information, share the information. On the document I gave to minority leader, there was some columns, about 5 other columns. Now, first of all, if I'm sharing information because I'm trying to prove a point, I'm sharing the information. I'm not crossing out some names, blocking some, keeping some, putting up half of the document, and so on. Because if all of the document was shown, you would see on the completion column, 0% going all the way down for Avicon. You would also see a waiting payment going all the way down for the payment status. And that would have made anybody ask, but why is it saying 0%, and why is it saying a waiting payment, but we're seeing paid for anyone else? And that's because I gave the minority leader the most updated version of the document we have here in the division, because we started paying persons. We had a total bill of almost 42 million. And at that stage, when I gave that to him, we had already paid out half of that. So anybody who's looking, because you see, you have to be a critical thinker whenever you're presenting with information. And you're looking at a document like that, 0%. What does that mean? Is it that this person was approved after everyone? They haven't started the work yet. Why were they approved after everyone else? And what is this person supplying that no one else has? And the document, again, that's not shown based on what I saw. Lots of other information that would have at least made people question the validity and reliability of that information presented. Yeah? When I gave minority leader that information, I could have said, you know what? Because it's, you had the headline up, major cover up in the THA. You can't hide in the THA. There's the Freedom of Information Act that anybody can, apply and get information for. And as secretary, it's my first year. We campaigned against, corruption. We campaigned for transparency and accountability. So to come in your first year and you're realizing that, you can just be so straight with the information. Why would I cover it up? And that's why when I saw your headline, I was like, wow, major cover up means there was something to hide. But what is there to hide when you utilize community engagement? As I said before, you don't have anybody in Bethesda, Coteaux, to deal with Bethesda Government Primary School. You look at the neighboring districts, there is no one to deal with it there. You look at the island, there is no one. And then, of course, you have to go overseas. And the thing about this particular company, they are the only distributors in Trinidad and Tobago of Thermotech 99. So it's not because, again, based on what I saw in your caption, in your headline for the information that you were presenting, based on this scenario, is that Tobago contractors were overlooked. But this company was the only company in that particular category for having this. So there was no competition. There wasn't even a bidding or anything like that, because no, not because you're the only company, it means that you could just bring a price, and we run with that price. And that's where the chief administrator would come in. You go and you sit, of course, with the leaders in the industry, I guess internationally, because they didn't have any competition here. You look at what you got from them before, because as I also said, we were not the first administration to utilize this company. The Division of Education did utilize this company before. Former secretary and chief secretary utilized this company. And therefore, all they had to do was to pull the file, and I have it right here, with what Avicon was able to do before, and just look at the engagement the division had with that company and just take it further. The only difference is it was only this year that Avicon became PCO regularized, PCO pre-qualified. So before 2022, they were a registered company and they did work with the Division of Education, Innovation and Energy. But it's only this year they started showing up on that THA procurement list, which means that predating this time, they were engaged because of that need for their service. But in terms of the process, there was another stage to be completed.
So just for clarity purposes, the Tobago First policy is a policy that you met at the division, and this company Avicon has its own address in Tobago.
No, so it's not. I didn't meet at Tobago First. It's not written like that. It's called community engagement, and how it's expressed is same thing. You deal with the immediate electoral district. So there are 15 files in my division, and work's going to these 15 files. So you look for a contractor in that district first. It used to be 12, and when I came into the division, I actually met 15, which means somewhere between them declaring those 15 electoral districts, me winning the seat, me becoming secretary, the files were changed and rearranged into 15 files with electoral district names on them. So the community engagement policy meant it's not exclusively Tobago, right? But it's Tobago first, and we start off in the district, we spread to neighboring districts, we look throughout the island of Tobago, and then if we can't find anyone with that service to be provided to us, then we go across the water.
All right, thank you.
It's clearly a Trinidadian company, but they're the only company able to. And as I said, when the question was asked to me on the 2nd of September, their names were not showing up on the documents I had. And that is because at that point in time, they were not approved. The approval, even if it happened on that day, it was not in front of me. The chief administrator had those files that went beyond the particular spend. And so when the information came back to me, and that's not the only company that was added after the 2nd of September, but everybody else happened to be Tobagonian. They were the only Trinidad contractor on this document.
Do you think that you were led astray by your team because couldn't somebody have intervened in that process before you responded to the media, at least to alert you to the most up-to-date information?
Right. So one of the things I'm saying, Piers, and even if someone did intervene, if I had to learn from something here, it would be that I do two things. One, I either say, based on the information given to me by the technocrats of my division, or based on the information I have in front of me at this point in time, I am only seeing XYZ. Or I could say, listen, although this is what I'm seeing in front of me, it doesn't rule out the possibility of this happening, because the policy, although it's Tobago first, it's not Tobago exclusive, because we want to be able to have our schools repaired. And if when we look through the length and breadth of this island, we're not finding a particular contractor for whatever it is, then we have to obviously get that contractor wherever the contractor is. And so I'm that very definitive way I responded to the question. If I have to, because I learned from my mistakes, if I have to go back, I would have expressed it like that to Elizabeth Williams. Liz, in front of me right now, I'm not seeing any Tobago. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing any Trinidad contract at all. But we're not finished with the process. There's some approvals still to be met by the chief administrator. We should be getting those back shortly. Or we are, exploring the options of other works, and I'm not certain who's going to win those bids. I'm not certain who's going to get the contract. But based on what I have in front of me on the 2nd of September, there is no one else. All I'm seeing are Tobago addresses here, which are a point of clarity here too. I could be a Trinidad contractor and I have a house. And when I say Trinidad, I was born and raised in Trinidad, but I have a house in Tobago and I use a Tobago address. So if we really had to take the thing there, how do you, and that's why it's kind of discriminatory to be going down a road of Trinidad versus Tobago contractor. You know what I mean? I could be living in Arima and I have a house in Crown Point, Tobago. And when I'm doing business in Trinidad, I use my Trinidad address. And when I'm doing business in Tobago, I use my Tobago address.
I suppose that's where it's important for politicians in particular to clarify the policies, right? Because, of course, Tobagonians have a certain expectation based on what they heard. But then in reality, it seems like it's different.
Yeah. In this case, this is actually a policy I met in the division. And I was kind of impressed by it because I was like, this policy gives Tobagonians a chance, especially when you have new and upcoming contractors. You're giving them the opportunity to, to build their capacity. And you're not crowding the room with too many persons and making it a bit harder for them. And of course, as an area representative, I want to know someone in my district had an opportunity to be able to do something right in my electoral district. As a matter of fact, there's a sense of pride and belonging and identity that comes with anybody doing anything in the place that they were born and raised. Someone attending Bethesda Government Primary School and being a contractor now may feel some sense of pride in the work they deliver to Bethesda Government Primary School. So it makes you feel, very, very a part of the process. However, you cannot make a determination like that to the detriment of getting the work done, to the detriment of delivery. And so if the length and breadth
yes.
I can't find anybody able to deliver this service to me, then again, in a twin island republic stage as Trinidad and Tobago, I should be able to, let's open up now to Trinidad and Tobago.
I totally understand, and thank you for being so open and willing to explain that. Yes, but moving on, but moving on, because we want to get to the knowing you part, but we have a little bit more things to discuss very quickly. I know that you have been through some administrators, right?
Yes.
I think you're on your third administrator.
I'm on my third.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Is it because there has been some discrepancy, or you've been accused of being a narcissist and quite arrogant and chasing the administrators out of town?
Yes. Anybody who could tell you about me, I'm a very bubbly, very high energy, very spirited person. I've always been like this, since I've known myself, always. And anybody could tell you this is me. I came to the division on the 13th of December. And by April, we were changing administrator. As a matter of fact, I was in a meeting with that administrator going through the strategic direction of the division. We haven't had one since 2008. And so we were very excited to finally ground the division in some policy and philosophy so we can take it through the phases of short, medium, and long-term goals. And right there, a letter came to me and a letter came to the administrator with a message that, the administrator is now going to be reassigned to the Division of Health, and I'm going to be, and I was there like, wow, we're now going through policy, we're now going through strategic direction, we're grounding ourselves 4 months in. School is about to be reopened in 2 weeks, and this is reopened after 2 years of the pandemic. This is the third term, right, of the last academic year. We're finally reopening. What a time for an administrator to be leaving a division. And because I was so young and fresh and new in the politics, you kind of want that voice of reason guiding you. And this was an administrator who, in my opinion, was really grounded in the division. She had been here for a bit. She was one of the most senior administrators in this space. And so I looked towards her for that leadership and that guidance, So I was like, I really hope that whoever is coming is also very experienced. The Division of Education is no walk in the park. It's a division with lots of issues, lots of potential though, but lots of challenges that you just really need to buckle down and get figured out. And you want that guidance. You don't want to be a new secretary trying to find your way without that grounding guide on your side, right?
I mean, but by the time you got to sort of the second administrator, there was some kind of but I just want to speak to that because I do recall that during the election, I would have spoken in my Let Tobago Talk podcast where we kind of spoke about all of Tobago and how, obviously, Tobago employs 80% of its population in the Tobago House of Assembly. That's a mammoth amount. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but quite a lot of Tobagonians.
In the house last week, I realized that it's not as many as we think it is. But yeah.
Okay, so quite a lot of Tobagonians are employed by the THA. But to just speak to my point, I spoke about back then about how even in the previous administration, secretaries often get the brunt of the wrath of the people because they usually don't see what is happening behind the scenes with people's head-to-heads with administrators and different public servants not doing their part in kind of thing. So I suppose what I'm asking is what did you kind of learn, because perhaps it's very difficult for Tobagonians to realize that sometimes you need to have a little mirror to show yourself, to say, listen, are we aiding, are we helping, or are we, helping in the development of Tobago, or are we kind of not helping and are our own enemy? And because, like you said, right, your chief administrator take control of certain things because, you don't deal with procurement, but Tobagonians don't know this, right? And so you would have the brunt of people wrath up saying, how come you said this, but actually this is happening, and why is there such a disconnect? Could you speak to that a little bit? Because I think
one of the things that I wish we can do more of, edifying the public on the roles and responsibilities of a secretary versus the roles and responsibilities of an administrator. I learned so much more after coming into the seat, and there are lots of gray areas. So for instance, if I have to call a staff meeting now, if I want to meet all my heads, I just can't walk in a room and say, heads, let's meet. I have to do that through the administrator. If we're deciding to have a conversation with the landlord about the rent and how, we should treat with the square footage and if we should be increasing that or whatever other issue, the administrator also needs to be there with me. And what I think happened after that first administrator is a very fresh, young, and when I'm saying young, new into the administrative responsibilities individual came to the division, and you had a secretary who was very inexperienced and an administrator who I also believe was inexperienced. And as I said before, this division really needed that experience. So one of us had to be. You needed that person who understood the vision of the Division of Education, Research and Technology, and would be able to guide the secretary. Secretary, this is what happens for this process to be successful. Secretary, yes, you may want to do it this way, but based on, the accounting system, this can happen this way.
It's really refreshing, I would say, though, to hear you kind of acknowledge, these learnings about, the things on the job, because, I think during the election, because I was stating these things, and of course everyone was in their emotions and stuff, people, I guess, were accusing me of political bias because they just automatically thought that I was talking about blaming the administrators to kind of deviate away from the politician's responsibility. But at the end of the day, and hearing you now experiencing that, it now begs the question, how do we need to change politics in Tobago going forward? And how does one address this issue that is the public service in terms of those not adding or aiding to the development of Tobago? Because, there are, of course, tough decisions that have to be made, right, in order to change Tobago for the better. But I guess what I'm saying is the politicians who are bold enough to probably really put the mirror up to people might actually sink them, because people don't really want to look at themselves and actually feel, that I have a personal responsibility.
Right. One of the things Chief Secretary did, and he does it all the time, and I don't know if that happened to this extent predating us, he puts the secretaries and the administrators in the same space. So from onset, we've had these meetings together not the chief administrator dealing with the administrators and the chief secretary dealing with the secretaries. And that is because we understand that the collaboration and the relationship and the communication between secretaries and administrators must, go hand in hand, that there must be a beautiful marriage. And it's not personality. I don't have to be your best friend, but we have to understand that we have a responsibility to the division and on different levels, right? The administrative and the policy. And therefore, by him bringing us together very early in the game and at every stage of the game, even at the end of the financial year, we had to sit together, administrator and secretary, because the secretary had the mandate and understood the policy direction, but the administrator had to deal with that accountability and transparency part and ensure that you crunch your numbers and the numbers are balanced at the end of the day. He put us in the same space and to be able to help us work through whatever challenges we may be having. Because at the end of the day, Tobago has to win. And for Tobago to win, you can't have the bureaucratic process keeping back that executive element of the thing. And I think what we've had is a kind of separation. Persons just come, you do your job, I do my job. And now we have a nice harmony of the leaders in this space. And even staff understand that once you have an administrator and a secretary, as I said before, you don't have to be best friends, but understanding your roles and responsibilities and sharing in that vision to create the transformation of the division in the first instance and the island, then you have that harmony, and that harmony brings forth that bearing that fruit, that you want to see being born.
Well, that's a very progressive way to look at it, and it's incidentally, the name of the party is progressive, right? But it's very progressive, and I welcome that. But it's just because in the previous administration they were mentioning these things, but because people were so angry about the 20 years of, I guess, quote unquote PNM failure and so on, they weren't really willing to hear that reality, and it's good that you're admitting that is an experience, but you've now given a progressive way of how to kind of move that forward, I suppose.
Because let me tell you, frustrating pace. If you look at an organizational chart of the division, now you're going to see the secretary above the administrator. But a secretary can't make any major move without that administrator approval and vice versa. All right, so the administrator and the secretary, more or less, you're there together making the move. But let me tell you, if you ask anybody right now, any random person, probably in Trinidad, let's say you ask anybody in Trinidad, who is the administrator of the Division of Education, Research and Technology, you may not know. You may not know. You understand? And that's because the secretary is the one who faces the public. The secretary is the one who is the face of the division. And so sometimes, and that's why even in the House, when I ask minority leader, it's not on the order paper and it's not related to the question. Give me the opportunity to, and you can actually send that again as another question. It's because in the House, you're afforded 3 weeks to be able to research that information. And again, it's because the secretary is responsible for policy, the bureaucratic process, the administrative process. The administrator has that responsibility. And so even for me to come into the House and explain what's happening with the school repairs program or anything to do with procurement or so, I have to send that question that comes to me to the administrator. Administrator is the one who now goes to the technical team and gets that information and then brings that information back to me, the secretary. Sits with me, secretary, this is a response. This is where we're at with it. You understand? You think you need more information and so on. And so you are literally in charge of a division, but you have this guide on your side who does it's like a henchman. The administrator is like a henchman. And so you come with the policy positions and so on, your administrator gets that policy implemented through your technical team. So it's each person needs the other person. And then having really solid relationships with your administrator is important. Again, because you want that administrator to be able to really guide you. You want that administrator to say, listen, no, this isn't the way it's done. And that's the thing, when the secretary gives the administrator an instruction, the administrator, as fast as possible, has to take that instruction out. However, the administrator also guides advising.
And of course, there have been instances where, the secretary and the administrator had loggerheads, and you have a situation where even maybe they don't take any action and you look bad, right? And we saw that in different dispensations and stuff. But going forward to something more positive, could you tell me what is your ambition for your division?
So I was a teacher for almost 18 years of my life. And being on that side of the fence looking in, you're seeing everything that's wrong, in your opinion, with the system. You're seeing the education zone, Tobago. We've been in that hovering between 7th and 8th for the longest while as an education zone. So you're seeing that we have some shortcomings there that we definitely need to change. And it just won't happen overnight. So we knew that we had to take a strike at the curriculum, strike at our training, strike at our value systems. Take a look at how we just impart education, what we do with remedial education, and what we do with accelerated learners. So the whole ideology of education needed to change. But you also had challenges where we just weren't treating with our staff well. HR concerns, persons owed years of gratuity, teachers owed years of increments, persons unable to move from one range to the other. And of course, this Trinidad Tobago construct and the fact that the service commissions are in Trinidad and persons waiting in long lines to be interviewed, you had all those challenges. And I was like, listen, again, Pes, if you had asked me 2-3 years ago if politics was in my future, I would have told you no. Because, all these issues we go through as politicians, it kind of, had me waning off, had me in the distance looking on and being very, very cautious of the fact that your life becomes an open book, the fact that the criticisms pile on, the fact that you're no longer seen as human, and I just was like looking on, how do people do this thing? And I'm here now. And so when I look at the journey and I look at my why, I was just a teacher. I was interviewed in the service, took study leave, went to university, started my postgrad, returned to Tobago, and I was placed on contract. And you're on contract and you don't know you're on contract until 5 years later. And you're now signing your first contract 5 years later. And you're owed these years of gratuity and you're trying to figure out, why am I on contract? And it's because the vacancy is not clear and the establishment needs to be audited and you're there in line thinking you're next, but there's somebody, really, really, really chaotic, complicated system. And I always complained about it, and I gathered some other teachers facing similar scenarios, and we took the division to court, and we kind of battled it out. And I was like, listen, there must be a way that this system can change. It has to be systematic. And so when I got involved in politics, I didn't even think of myself becoming the Secretary of Education. I mean, people would say it's a perfect fit, you were a teacher. But in this game, sometimes it's not about where you were, it's wherever you can put your passion. And I think that politicians can fit in anyway. It's in this role, you can fit in anyway. Your passion, that goal of service and servitude, you understand? And so when I ended up here, I was like, I was on the outside looking in, complaining, and now I'm in a position to do something about it. But again, as one person, you're not able to just walk into a division, sit at a desk, and just sign the policies away, or just automatically wave a magic wand and just fix the thing. The entire support system needs to be had. And then you take that passion, and even if you get your division going, you still have to go to executive council and make the decisions there, and then come back and then have whatever policy it is implemented. And then if you have mindsets going in a particular direction for so long, then that in itself becomes a challenge, becomes a battle. You have persons operating in a particular system for a particular period in time, in this instance, 2 decades, and then you're coming with all this new vision and this mandate and wanting to be so progressive, but it doesn't happen overnight. And one of the things that I it was like a kind of, oh my gosh moment for me, was the fact that you think that you could change the world quickly. And we've been here for 11 months and in a few days, it's going to be a year. And, we've realized that it's not so easy, because you have to have persons moving along with you, and they have to share in that vision, and they have to be able to see it from that level and understand the responsibility that every single person in a division such as this one has to the division and has to the people of Tobago. And because we've been so politically divisive, when you have an administration changing in and one leaving, like what happened with us a year ago, you have to be very mindful that you would have had persons, dancing to the beat of the drum of the previous administration and having a very difficult time switching gears. You have some persons, they just come to work and they work. Whoever is the secretary, doesn't matter to them. But there are some other persons, because they're politically vested, it's so difficult to switch gears and understand, listen, it was never about a party. It was always about Tobago. And I think the more persons who understand that, you come to serve in a division, you come to serve in the Tobago House of Assembly, you have to understand that the politics has a place, but when you come into this place, you have to understand it's Tobago first. And I think the more we can push that mindset of country first, I think the more productive we're going to be as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It's not just a Tobago thing, because everything I just spoke, I'm certain if I call Dr. Dolly, she can give me the flip side of what happens with her as minister in Trinidad. And by the way, that's one of the things that I ensure that I did very early, ensure that I started and built a relationship with the minister. Because again, because you're putting country first, you want to be able to be in that place where as Minister of Education and Secretary of Education, you have open communication. You collaborate, you understand parameters. And like, for instance, you're seeing that now when we have the adverse weather, we have two different press releases coming out, one coming from the ministry and one coming from the division. And that's actually good, because we have to understand that it's two different islands, and our weather pattern in Trinidad may not be the weather pattern in Tobago. And for instance, we're in the orange alert, but if you look at what's happening in Trinidad as compared to what's happening in Tobago, then we really needed to be in a place where we can agree that, you could be having a closure of school today, but the sun is shining in Tobago. So it's not a national policy. It's happening in Trinidad, but in Tobago, we have a different weather pattern. So once you have
I am so pleased that you have put yourself on the hot seat, been very open, prepared to answer some of the tough questions, right? And I think you did a fantastic job. I just in the last very thing that I wanted to say is that there's so many young people who sit at the wayside. They look at things that they're uncomfortable with that's happening in the society, and they think, what can I do to make a difference? And of course, you are somebody who didn't, along with many other young people, including the minority leader, who didn't stand to the wayside and do nothing, but you stood up. So how would you encourage the people of Tobago, and by extension Trinidad and beyond, what they can do to kind of answer that call?
Let me tell you, I don't think you need to get actively involved in politics to make a difference. I was making a difference in my community just by being a regular teacher. And again, that comes from love for island and love for country. And therefore, I always tell everyone, I'm not going to be a career politician. I think there is a season, you're called for that season, you serve to the best of your ability and you pass that baton on. And I think what happens with a lot of politicians, and I mean, it's early days still, I guess lots of persons gave such an eloquent speech in the beginning, but really and truly for me, it was never about being a politician. It was always about representing people and being their voice. And because it was always like that, I try to, and I guess the teacher in me, I always try to look at the learning experience gained from it. I don't want to look back at this period in my life, whether it's 4 years, 8, 12, and say, you know what? I could have done this, but because I was so arrogant, or because my heads were in the cloud, or because I didn't learn from a lesson, it didn't happen. For me, this journey thus far has been totally a learning experience. As I said before, what happened with me in that press conference, you won't catch me in a press conference like that now, being very, because even if you have documents in front of you, you don't know what can happen by the time you leave that press conference and go back into your division. So it's good to always think of the implications for whatever comes out of your mouth. I mean, that clip, that song bite is being played all over. No one chose to ask, what date did she say that? Did she say that last week? Did she say it yesterday? When was the contract given? When, you understand? Once it comes out of the mouth of the politician, it's so difficult to fix that, you know? And therefore, I'm going back to what I'm saying. A lot of young persons look to us, and some, you know, they admiring the role, the leadership role. Many persons, you know, they ask, you know, how difficult it is to get into this. Some persons, you know, they admire you like, oh my God, how do you do it? I couldn't have my life as an open book like that. I can be making all that sacrifice. And again, I think that it has to be bigger than you, the person. And that love, again, I keep saying it, love for Ireland. And that's what kind of keeps me going at pace. Because let me tell you, let me be honest with you now. This is me being real. When I saw the minority leader post whatever, I was like, politics again. You know, that's his role. You're in opposition, and that's what people in opposition do. They do whatever they have to do to sell a particular narrative so they can get back in power. That's how it is. If you've never been in power, like we weren't before the 6th of December last year, you're showing what they're doing that's, you know, that's totally wrong. You're showing what they're doing that you wouldn't do, and you're selling that vision that you're going to go in there with and try to change the trajectory. When I saw it on his page and I saw it on the political leader, the Tobago Council's page, I didn't pay it any mind. I was like, whatever, you're doing what you have to do. Respect to you. Everybody has a role and responsibility based on what side of the political divide they're on. But when I saw you with it, I was like, with a headline like that, major cover up, and, you know, Tobago contractors were sidestepped. And I was like, no, you know, I looked at it like, why didn't you even, you know, try to at least, you know, I want to question I mean, it eventually happened. But, you know, when I saw it, I was like, all of this, the politics is a blood sport. You have to, it's not for the faint of heart. You can't look at it like it's a personality thing. Now, there are some periods along the way when I felt as if it's bordered on personal attacks. But again, all of that is par for the course. And so you wake up every day knowing that, listen, you're a public figure now. Whether you want to admit it, you like it or not, that's what you are. So where you could have gotten away with saying, listen, fake news, and, you know, because of my personality and the fact that I'm so animated, you know, and I use my facial features a lot, I could have gotten away being like this as a teacher. It kept my students engaged and so on. But if I go to the house now and I say, the minority leader is asking me a question, and because he knows the standing orders and he knows that you can't ask a question that you answered before, or you can't move so far away from the substantive issue, I would say no. Right? But then as a politician, persons want more from you. They hold you at a higher standard. And so it makes you self-reflect. It makes me go back and say, you know what? You're too dramatic. Or your facial expressions, you need to work on that. Or you probably sometimes need to question, you know, what you put your energies into and not. Personality-wise, I think that since I've known myself, this has been me. So I don't have a challenge when somebody comes at me with personality. But you see, in this role as a politician, I think my name is one of the most important things I can protect. And so anything that seems to be going in a defamatory direction, or anything that may be misleading in nature, I have a responsibility to myself. I have 2 daughters looking up at me, everything I do. One is in 5th form now, so, you know, she's into social media. And whenever she sees something coming at her mom, she's unhappy. She comes, mommy, why did you have to get involved in this? Now, I feel so angry sometimes when I see these things coming at you, but that's just the role that I'm in now. I have to understand that in this role, you have to be strong. You have to, you know, literally pull yourself together when things like this happen, and understand that, listen, others went through this. It's just that I kind of noticed that as women, and sorry to take it down this road, but I noticed that as women, we have a little more difficult time. I saw Lisa Hanna, MP Lisa Hanna, there in Jamaica, speaking to it this weekend. The fact that, you know, if you're passionate as a woman, it's taken to mean that you're too emotional. And I've seen men be very passionate about things that they care about. And, you know, this is a man who really is into whatever. But when a woman goes in that direction and express their passion like that, you're too emotional. Check your temperament. You're getting too annoyed easily. And on.
I'm so happy that you mentioned all of this, and we have a question from Shaquille, and that might be the end there. But I would ask you, do you think perhaps that might Tracy Davidson Celestine might have been a victim of that as well? What you just mentioned
Of what? The same attack. Now, women in general. I want to speak to women in general. I wouldn't pull out any particular. I see it all the time. When you look at how a headline is written, right? When a woman does whatever, it's written in a different way. It just is. And now I'm not going to use that as an excuse. And that's just the way it is. And I have to be very mindful that, this world isn't set up in an equal way. Along the campaign trail, a woman's past comes up, her marital status comes up, things alluding to her love life comes up. And you don't get that same type of discourse as it relates to men. And that's just so unfortunate, right? What I've noticed,
yes, for sure. Go ahead.
That has to come from you as a woman in politics, a different type. You know that you're not judged by physical appearance, and you always have to ensure that you keep your emotions in check and all of that. And I just realized to be you.
You would agree that ambiguity is a very dangerous thing in politics, because if you're not very clear about what you're standing for, and if there are any discrepancies, to be fair to the minority leader, he's doing his job. But there was a discrepancy in terms of what was stated, and you have cleared that up, and you've given all the specifics, and you've shown the evidence, and so it's very difficult.
He has a role to do, but you think the minority leader didn't know why we chose Avicon? It's clear on the document. It was there, Thermatech 99. And if the minority leader does his research as he purports to do, he would have known that his administration, who had this policy.
But even forget the minority leader. Remember Tobagonians, right? Forget the politics. Tobagonians. Ambiguity is very difficult because if people hear something and then they hear something else, they'll run with it, and then that's you, right?
I have learned that lesson. Coming to give information, you come direct and you come clear. You also look at the potential implications of your response. So, did I give too little information? Would someone else wonder what I meant when I said this? I have to look at the jargon I used to. There may be some persons who are not, on the level of where I'm getting at. I may have to break it down some more. I may have to also be very mindful that what I have in front of me on the 2nd of September may not be the same information that I may have in front of me on the 5th. So you look at all the possible fallouts from the communication you're giving. Again, as I said, and you don't take it for granted that whatever you have to disseminate in the space at that point in time won't be used against you as a soundbite later on. And as I said, no one asked, when was this recording done? They just heard the Secretary of Education saying, that's fake news. There are no Trinidadians here on whatever. I mean, I was looking down and so on. All of that didn't matter. It came out of my mouth. Even if you didn't see my body language and you were hearing the clip, you're hearing that clip playing on the 24th of November, and then you can show a document with someone's name on it. That wouldn't matter. I said it came out of my mouth. But again, context, right? And you being certain that that communication doesn't come with the implications of it, the ambiguity, being vague, giving too much information at the point in time or giving too little. So it has to be balanced. And you have to understand that you have to be self-reflective and you have to learn from your mistakes. So as I said before, you're not catching me professing something like that with that amount of certainty. When I get the information from someone else, because that's the thing, I'm not the one engaging the contractor. So I have to get the information from my technocrats, one. And I have to also understand that whatever information I have in front of me, the list changed since then, because of course, again, with all this adverse weather, we're experiencing some issues in some schools and work is ongoing. That's what routine maintenance is too. So the information I would have given on a Monday can change by Tuesday. So you let the public know that. Although I'm saying this, it doesn't take away the possibility of that. And so what I can also do too is provide some more clarity once it changes. That is definitely going to keep me from having a scenario like the one I experienced, which was, wow.
Your last positive words to Tobago, and we end.
Someone is asking a question.
Somebody's asking a question. Shaquille says, what has been your most difficult day since assuming
Oh
office?
my God. To be honest with you, that same 2nd of September. Because that was the day I had to announce to Tobago that Scarborough Secondary School would not be opening. And that is a school that I was a teacher at for 9 years. So you know how difficult it is. You're in the position as secretary now and you're having to tell your colleagues, because I still call them that listen, everybody else is going to be open on the 5th, but not you, because there's an issue that just could not be rectified before, and we have to figure it out. You know, it's way more severe than we envisioned it to be. The contractors tried, and I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It's not going to be ready by Sunday. I mean, when we looked at that issue, I could have just told the contractor, just put back the galvanize on it and let's just save face. Let's open. I want all my schools to open on the 5th, and let me smile for the cameras and be able to be posting and saying all 57 schools open. But because I was an actual teacher in the school, and I knew that that was a challenge, that I knew that I had to be responsible to the teachers, to the students and their parents. And that day I had to face the media and say, listen, school is not opening for Scarborough Secondary School. I was heartbroken. I literally went home and just could not deal with it. You know, because your colleagues are messaging you, you know, why Scarborough Sec always on the back burner? Why administration in, administration out? No one is giving us the attention we deserve. We need a new school. So it was the most difficult day. I don't ever want to feel that way ever again. And so I've made a personal commitment to ensure that if it's one thing I get done, is to ensure that we get that school for Scarborough Secondary. I don't know we're doing it. When I say I don't know we're doing it, I mean, you can have so much ambition, but when the money isn't yours, we don't have the money in our hand, we're depending on the central government right now to fund the build of this school, then you know that you have to advocate strongly. And I have to ensure that I keep at it with my chief secretary for us to ensure that central government understands the importance of this academic institution to the very history of Tobago. It's one of our own. It's just a how we're an independent nation. They came into existence in 1961. And I just really, really want persons to feel rest assured that after so many years of advocating for a new plan, that we're finally going to get that school.
McCasey makes a point based on something you said earlier about, you know, people attacking, character defamation. And you know, even the impact on your daughter. He said, you know, when allegations or things are being said and there's a claim, there's evidence. He thinks that the evidence should be made public. And he says, and if it can't or isn't made public, it should be seen as defamation of character. Would you agree with that?
Right. So yes, if there's an allegation and there is anything that you can produce to show, listen, this is just an allegation, here is the proof, then sure. I mean, that's a way for you to literally say, listen, there's been some noise in the space. It's been misleading. It's politics being politics. Here are the facts, you know? And I also, I'm reading his question there. Opposition used to pay a counterpart. Yeah. So yeah, so as a politician, that's, you know, they say, and the truth shall set you free. That's what you have to do. You have your facts, you have your evidence there. I did a lot of research after the minority leader kept prodding. I said, no, listen, I am going to research this thing. And I found so much. I found out that, as I said, the company is a company we engaged before. I would not have known that, you know, and the recommendations and so on behind this company, very, very astute. And we're seeing that the company has a really good track record for delivery. And you're seeing all of that there. But the point I'm trying to make is you also have to be very responsible with what comes out of your mouth as a politician. So even before having to look for the evidence to prove yourself right and all of that, you ensure that what comes out you can stand up to scrutiny and you don't have that information being used as a soundbite. And to be honest with you, I didn't know after presenting him with the information. I'm like, okay, so you have the information now. That's the end of that constant questioning in the house. That's what you would think if I give you a package, you know, with everything you need to know. I'm thinking, but of course it's politics. And politics would mean he knows. But of course, you have the show. So let me go back to the house and ask again, you sure there was no Trinidad contractor? And then you pull the clip from me saying this thing since September, and you pair it up with the fact that you found something I gave you, but you found it. We know, I understand how the politics goes.
Well, let me end this session by asking the best question of all. Now, you went to school with the minority leader.
Yes, I did.
Could you tell me one positive thing about the minority leader that you might admire about him?
So he met me privately. I was in Great Fete weekend. And he was there and he met me and he said, listen, this isn't personal, right? And I was like, what? And he was like, this is not personal. I have a responsibility to my political organization. It's one of me versus 14 of you, and then you have your 3 councillors and I have my 1. But this isn't personal. And the reason why I come at you like that is because I think you can be doing so much more. And I was like, listen, you could do what you have to do, and you've been doing what you have to do, but I don't think you have to get into the personal attacks. Because he did go into the personal attacks earlier this year, and Tobagonians didn't really treat too nicely with it. Because that's the thing about politics. Come at me if you want to mislead, if you want to throw a narrative out there. That's how people expect the politics to go. That's par for the course. But I think persons have a real challenge with the personality issues, the personal attacks, you're dressing up too much, you're trying to, is it you're a model or when you go in that direction, people have a challenge, So I had to tell him, I say, you do what you have to do. I have to do what I have to do. But when you come at me, I would never come at you on your personality, come at you on your personal appearance. That's just, to me, out of bounds. Allow persons to do what they have to do. And so I respect his role as minority leader. He's probably going to ask me about school repair for the rest of the year. I expect it, right? However, I think that, again, we went to the same high school. We were in the same house. We were actual, and I'm saying were because I probably would have to sit with him and have some clear idea of what we are now. But we were friends, I knew he had political ambition before now. I never had. And so I guess he was surprised when he saw me enter into this field, as I say, I never had. And from the time I started on the campaign trail, I realized that, he kind of started to drift apart. He started to go really hard at me. He walked the ground with my opponent in January. He did the same in December. And I was like, what's going on here, So we're young Tobagonians. I think he has that same passion and vigor and ambition and that real need to make a difference. I understand the fact that he's a minority in the truest sense. It's one of him, really. But I think that you have to put Tobago first. And we don't have to be the typical politicians. We don't have to look at what our predecessors did and emulate them. I want us to bring a difference to the politics. We can agree to disagree. We can have differences in philosophy and opinions. But when we go out there, you have that respect. And sometimes I wonder if he does. I mean, when he said that to me in that event, I thought about it. And then I was like, listen, sometimes you want to guard your heart, especially when someone was really close to you and you're seeing a particular behavior coming from them. But all in all, I want the best for him. I really do. He's young in the politics, just as I am. We've just been catapulted into this space very quickly too. Usually politicians are particular age. So when you retire from politics, that's it. You retire from, a working career. But we're so young that we can be finished with this in 4 years, in 8 years, in 12 years, and still have an entire life ahead of us. God's willing, of course. But yeah, and so I want the best for him. I want the best for Tobago. And so I am going to wish him well. I'm going to give him that respect. I just want him to be fair. When you're putting information out there, put this thing up, be respectful. Don't grasp at straws. Don't be deliberately misleading. Because again, I'm going to do my due diligence to defend my name. I will. I'm going to put it out there. I'm also going to admit when I'm wrong. I'm going to say, yes, I messed up here. Yeah, I should have thought about it this way. I'm learning from it. But I think that for the last year, he's been literally nitpicking and pulling and grasping. And I want to catch her in this and I want to, so let's give it a break. Tobago deserves better in the politics. Tobago wants a change, even from the minority and from opposition in general. They want good governance. You want persons to keep the majority in check as well, but do it with some dignity and integrity, man. Let's do this thing.
Well, thank you, Secretary Hackett.
You're
Appreciate your time. You even gave us some extra time. It shows you with your.
To also click, because I'm seeing another article there. So give him the opportunity. Do the same thing, man.
Oh, I'm happy to update the Chief Secretary. You know me. I don't give politicians an easy time at all, right? So
No. Me, that's how I want it to be. Listen, we have to be held accountable. And I think being held accountable makes us better at our craft. And when I say better, I'm not talking about we better politicians per se. I'm talking about remembering your why and why you got involved and how many persons are depending on you to make a difference, a real difference too. So yes, keep us accountable, hold us up, to a higher standard, ensure that we do what we said we were going to do. We're human, we're not a robot. And so, it takes some time, it takes some getting used to. I'm still learning every day, but I'm trying to be a better version of myself with every passing day. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to at least let you see the real side of me. I'm a real human being, not a robot. So yeah, I'm going to approach this entire thing differently. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Bye-bye.